Well, good morning, boys and girls. I hope you're ready to listen to some stories once again, Monday morning, after a nice weekend playing with your family and your friends. I have about 4 different stories I'd like to read to you today. One of them is Walt Disney's Peter Pan. I thought you might enjoy this. I know as a child myself, I loved the Peter Pan stories, so I thought you might enjoy them as well. Here we go. There was a place, a faraway place, where the sun always shone, the sky was always blue, and no one ever grew old. This place was called Neverland, and it was where Peter Pan and Tinker Bell lived. And I'm sure you've seen cartoon movies of both Peter Pan and Tinker Bell. But this is more the original story. Not so very far away in the city of London, England, lived John, Wendy, and Michael Darling. Every night they would gather in the nursery to hear Wendy tell wonderful tales of Peter Pan's adventures with friendly Indians and nasty pirates in Neverland. One night, when Wendy was telling John and Michael a favorite Peter Pan story, Nana, their Saint Bernard, started barking outside in the yard. Not a moment later, Peter Pan appeared with Tinker Bell. "I came to find my shadow," said Peter Pan. "Nana took it from me the other night as I was secretly listening to your stories." Peter Pan liked listening to the stories about himself, too. "Here it is," said Wendy. John and Michael looked on in amusement as she sewed it back onto Peter's body. "I'm so glad we saw you tonight, Peter," Wendy said. "You see, tonight's my last night in the nursery because tomorrow I have to grow up." "But that means no more stories," cried Peter, "unless I take you all back to Netherland with me." Wendy, John, and Michael couldn't believe their ears. "That would be wonderful," they shouted. Peter Pan sprinkled some of Tinker Bell's pixie dust over the children and told them to think happy thoughts. "Now you can fly," said Peter. Suddenly they were all soaring through the air of London, heading directly to Neverland. See how they're flying over the rooftops and the bridges and over the river? Down below, they saw golden rainbows and blue waterfalls and mermaids singing in a lagoon. It was the most beautiful place they had ever seen. There were beaches and deep forests, and of course, there was the Indian camp. Yes, this indeed was Neverland. "This way," called Peter Pan as Wendy, John, and Michael landed in one of the forests. He led them to the secret underground homes where he lived with his good friends, the Lost Boys. John and Michael played with the boys while Peter and Wendy went to visit the beautiful mermaids in the lagoon. It was there that Peter Pan spied the Indian chief's daughter, Tiger Lily, tied up in the boat of the evil Captain Hook. There's Captain Hook, and there's Tiger Lily. Oh my, she is tied up too. Peter and Wendy could overhear the pirate demanding, "Tell me the hiding place of Peter Pan." But Tiger Lily would not tell. Captain Hook and Peter Pan were enemies. They did not get along at all. "I have to save her," Peter told Wendy. They flew off together to Skull Rock, where Captain Hook had taken Tiger Lily. There, Peter challenged Captain Hook to a thrilling duel. Peter was so quick and brave that at last the nasty pirate landed in the water, only to be chased back to his ship by the ferocious crocodile. Peter rescued Tiger Lily and returned her to her father, the Indian chief. Captain Hook was very angry. "That cursed Peter Pan! I shall have my revenge against him once and for all," he cried. He captured Tinker Bell and forced her to show him where Peter Pan lived. Then he caged her in a lantern. Here's the little lantern right there. As Captain Hook's band of pirates approached Peter Pan's home, the Darlings and the Lost Boys were coming up from the underground. One by one they were captured and taken to the pirates' ship. See, here the boys are all tied up. That does not look very comfortable. "Peter Pan will save us," Wendy said bravely. Captain Hook roared with a wicked laughter. "Pan will never be able to save you," he shouted. "You will walk the plank." No one noticed as Tinker Bell escaped from the lantern. She flew as fast as she could to alert Peter Pan to the danger. Once Tinker Bell reached Peter Pan, he raced out to sea to rescue his friends. "I've come to stop you once and for all, Captain Hook," cried Peter. "This time you've gone too far." After another fierce duel, Peter Pan threw Hook and all the pirates overboard. Hook was chased away by the crocodile, and nobody cared to save him. "Thank you ever so much for rescuing us, Peter," said Wendy. "We would love to stay in Neverland a while longer, but it's getting late, and I think it's time for us to leave and go home." John and Michael nodded in agreement. "Well, if that's the case," said Peter, "we will sail tonight." Once again, Peter Pan sprinkled Tinkle Bell's pixie dust over everyone, and Captain Hook's pirate ship was suddenly sailing through the skies of Neverland, heading back to the Darlings' home in London. And there they are, being delivered to their home in London. You can tell it's London because of the chimney. But before Peter Pan and Tinker Bell started off for Neverland, they made Wendy, John, and Michael promise never ever to forget them. And they never did. I hope you enjoyed that. There are different stories about Peter Pan. That's just one of them. Now this one is not an imaginary story. It's just a little girl's idea about what it would be like if she could be the driver of a cement mixer. I know a lot of children are very interested and fascinated by trucks of all sorts. I know my grandson loves trucks, and cement mixers are among the ones he loves. And so this book is called If I Could Drive a Mixer, and it's by Michael Teitelbaum and illustrated by Jeff Walker. And there she is. She says, "My name is Laura. I love watching trucks at work." Looks like the cement mixer has come to her neighborhood. "My favorite truck is the mixer. Today, a mixer is pouring concrete for the foundation of a new house." And you can see there's stones down here that they're going to be pouring the cement on. What if I could drive a cement mixer? And here is a great picture showing how the cement comes out of this big tube down here and is put into the truck that will carry the cement to wherever it needs to be laid. I would fill my mixer with concrete. Concrete is made up of sand, gravel, cement, and water. And it's all mixed together. Now I'm ready to help build things using concrete from my mixer. People use concrete to build all kinds of things, like buildings and tunnels and bridges, sidewalks and driveways. The front part of my mixer is called the cab, right here. I would sit there when I drive. A big round metal container sits on the back of the mixer. This container is called a drum. I use the drum to mix the concrete. I pull a lever in the mixer's cab. That makes the drum start turning. Here's the lever that she's got to pull right there. The drum spins around and around. The concrete is mixed until it's ready to be poured. The great thing is that my mixer's drum can keep on spinning while I'm driving. By the time I get to the job, the concrete will be all ready. They have to keep it spinning so it won't solidify. That means get hard. Today, I help pour concrete for the walls and floors of a new basement. See the men down here? They have retaining walls that they have put up for part of the foundation. Concrete is wet and mushy. To hold it in place while it dries, workers use wooden boards. The boards are nailed together to make the shape of the walls and floors. These wooden holders are called a form. Now it's time for my mixer to go to work. Concrete pours out of the drum. It slides down a long chute into the forms. When the form is full, I turn off the drum and lift up the chute. Now you can see the concrete has been, these wooden forms, it looks like the concrete has been put in between two wooden forms. You can see that from the picture. And that is going to make the foundation walls of the basement for this house. Next, the concrete is smoothed out. See, he's got a trowel there that he's smoothing it all out with. When the concrete is dry, the wooden form is taken off. The new wall stands straight and strong, all by itself. Cement is used for building many, many buildings. All of our foundations for our houses. And in Europe, most of the buildings are built with concrete. And you can see the concrete walls. The outer walls are done the same way. Then the floor is poured. Soon we have a brand new basement, thanks to my cement mixer. You can see the cement on the floor here. It's just a little lighter color than the walls. I would do all of those things if I could drive a cement mixer. And I bet you've seen cement mixers maybe in your neighborhood, preparing the foundations in the basement of a new home. Now, the next story I'm going to read is just sort of fantasy, pure fantasy. It's about a little boy who's starting school, and he's not as sure about his teacher. And he's a little worried about what his teacher might be like. So he imagines some very strange things about his teacher. That you all will be going to school, either preschool or kindergarten, and some of you might be going to first grade, or might be in first grade right now. So I'm sure you've all thought about your teacher that you might have. Well, this is called The Teacher from the Black Lagoon. It's a story by Mike Thaler. The pictures are by Jared Lee. And there's a series of these. It's the first day of school, and I wonder who my teacher will be. I hear that Mr. Smith has dandruff and warts. Look at the warts on his nose. And Miss Jones has a whip and a wig. I'm sure the teachers don't have whips. They might have a wig, but not a whip. But Mrs. Green is supposed to be a real monster. Oh my, I have her. Mrs. Green, room 109. Oh, what a bummer that is. I sit at my desk, I fold my hands, I close my eyes. I'm too young to die. Suddenly, a shadow covers the door, and it opens. And in slithers Mrs. Green, and she really is green. She has a tail. She scratches her name on the blackboard with her claws. She looks a bit like an alligator. Now he's imagining this. This would not be a real teacher, I don't think. Freddie Jones throws a spitball. She curls up her lip and breathes fire at him. Freddie is gone. There's just a pile of black ashes on his desk. Talk about bad breath, giggles Eric Porter. She slithers over and unscrews his head and puts it on the globe stand right there. I bet she gives homework the very first day of class. Your homework for today, grins Mrs. Green, smoke rising from her nostrils, is pages 1 to 200 in your math book. All the fraction problems. We never had fractions, shouts Derek Bloom. Come up, here she beckons with her claw. Derek stands by her desk. This is a whole boy, she smirks. She takes a big bite. She says, this is half a boy. Now, you know fractions. Doris Fuddle cracks her gum. Mrs. Green swallows her in one gulp. No chewing in class, she smiles. Oh my gracious. He's really imagining horrible things about his teacher. Mr. Bender, the principal, sticks his head in. Keep up the good work, he nods and closes the door. I wish I could get sent to the principal's office. Let's call the roll, cackles Mrs. Green. Freddie Jones is absent. Derek Bloom is half here. Eric Porter is here and there. Doris Fuddle is digesting. What about spelling? Shouts Randy Potts. Spelling can be fun, beams Mrs. Green, wiggling her fingers at him. Abracadabra kazam. That's tough to spell, says Randy. Suddenly there's a fat flash of light, a puff of smoke, and Randy is a frog. This is a very magical teacher, to say the least. Penny Weber raises her hand. Can I go to the nurse? She whines. What's wrong? Asks Mrs. Green. I have a huge headache, says Penny. Mrs. Green wiggles her fingers. There's another flash of light, and Penny's head is now the size of a pin. Better, says Mrs. Green. Now it's nap time. Everyone who still has a head, put your head down on your desk. And so he's thinking, I hope I make it to recess. Sweet dreams, she cackles as I close my eyes. Suddenly, the bell rings and I wake up. So I guess he was dreaming kind of a scary dream. And there's a pretty woman writing her name on the blackboard. She has real skin and no tail, and she says, I am Mrs. Green, your teacher. and she smiles. I jump out of my chair and I run up and I hug her. Well, thank you, she says. I'm glad you're here. And he says, not as glad as I am. And the Mrs. Green that he imagines, as we well know, is just a fairy tale. She doesn't really exist. She just existed in his imagination. Now I have one more story. And before I do that, though, I think I'm going to just have a little sip of water. Sometimes my throat gets thirsty when I'm reading. This is a book called Jemima Puddle Duck. It's based on the original story by Beatrix Potter. And let's see, who are the illustrations by? Pat Schoonover. Jemima Puddle Duck was upset because the farmer's wife took away her eggs, and she gave them to the hen to hatch. Even though it takes 28 days of sitting on the nest to hatch duck eggs, Jemima wanted to hatch her own eggs. Jemima took to hiding her eggs, but they were always found and taken to the hen. Jemima Puddle Duck decided to find a place far from the farm where she could hatch her own eggs in peace. One fine spring afternoon, Jemima set off along a path that led up the hill. From the hilltop she could see some woods in the distance. The woods looked like a safe, quiet place for her to build a nest. Jemima Puddle Duck ran down the side of the hill to get a good start. When she was moving quickly enough, she jumped into the air and flew away beautifully. She skimmed just over the treetops until she saw a clearing in the middle of the woods. Jemima landed in the clearing and began to search for a dry nesting place. She thought a tree stump among the tall foxgloves might be really nice. However, she was startled to find an elegantly dressed gentleman seated on the very stump she had in mind. He was reading a newspaper. "Quack," said Jemima to the man with the newspaper. Then the pointy-eared gentleman looked at Jemima. "Madam, have you lost your way?" he asked her politely. Now, what does he look like to you? He looks to me like he's a fox. Jemima Puddle Duck found him handsome and well-mannered. She explained that she was trying to find a suitable nesting place. "Indeed," said the gentleman. "I have a mound of soft feathers in my woodshed. You may nest there as long as you like." The foxy gentleman led the way to a shabby house that was built of sticks. In the back of the house, he opened the door to the tumble-down woodshed and showed Jemima in. Although Jemima was very surprised to find so many feathers in the woodshed, she made a nice nest for herself without any trouble. When Jemima came out of the woodshed to go back to the farm for the night, the whiskered gentleman swore he would take good care of the nest until she came back the next day. Jemima returned to the woodshed every afternoon. She laid 9 eggs in the nest, which the bushy-tailed gentleman admired very much. Looks like her nest is very soft. It's all full of feathers. I wonder where all those feathers came from. Jemima told the gentleman that she would now begin sitting on her eggs. He thoughtfully suggested that they celebrate first with a nice dinner. He asked Jemima to bring herbs and onions from the farm garden so he could make a delicious omelet. Poor Jemima was not even a bit suspicious. She waddled around the garden gathering snippets of herbs the gentleman had asked for, which are used for stuffing roast duck. Then she went into the kitchen to get onions. These are all things that go into roast duck. I think that furry gentleman had something else on his mind besides an omelet. Waddling out of the kitchen that afternoon, Jemima met Kep. The collie asked where she had been every day, so Jemima told him the whole story about the helpful gentleman with the bushy tail. The wise collie asked where the woodshed was, and then he trotted off to find some of his friends. Meanwhile, Jemima Puddle Duck carried the bag of herbs and onions up the hill. Then she flew over the woods and landed right in front of the foxy gentleman. Here she is. She's talking to Cap the collie there. Okay, and there she's landed right in front of the foxy gentleman. This time the gentleman was not polite to Jemima Puddle Duck. He rudely told her to hand over the herbs and be quick about checking her eggs. This made Jemima feel surprised and most unhappy. While Jemima was waiting inside the woodshed, she was frightened even more by the sound of pattering feet out and back. Then she saw a black nose sniff at the bottom of the door, and she heard the sound of the woodshed door being locked. A moment later, there were the most awful noises: barks, growls, howls, squeals, and groans. And from that day on, nothing more was ever seen of the foxy whiskered gentleman. Then Cap unlocked the door of the gentleman's woodshed to let out Jemima Puddle Duck. He had a bite on one of his hind ears, and both his friends were limping. The 3 dogs soothed Jemima and helped her to carry her 9 eggs back to the farm. What do you think had happened between the dogs and the fox? I think the 3 dogs scared the fox off, and I think they had a fight. The farmer's wife let Jemima Puddle Duck sit on her eggs for all 28 days. Even though they were carried all the way through the woods and over the hill back to the farm, the eggs hatched into beautiful ducklings. Jemima was very proud. Well, that is the end of our stories for today. I would like to just mention a couple of things that are still going on at the library. And I have to excuse myself. I didn't introduce myself in the beginning. I am Miss Nancy, and I represent the Upper Chichester Library in Upper Chichester, Pennsylvania, as you can see from the books behind me. Now, we've had some art to go and visual arts kits to go classes, virtual kits to go classes throughout the early and later spring. A number of those classes are now over, but we have 2 more art to go with Miss Teresa at 11 o'clock on Saturdays, and that would be May 7th and May 21st. And the kits are available for free at our library, and if you go online and work with her, you can find out how to use the art materials that are in the kits to make whatever it is she demonstrates. And the same thing goes with the crocheting kits. You can crochet along with Hannah on Fridays at 11 a.m. on Facebook. And there is May 6th, it's going to be crocheting a spring wreath, and May 20th is a flower dish cloth. And I can assure you, the spring wreath is very pretty. I think you would really enjoy that. There is also, we still have some of the meetings over at the church for the Tuesday Morning Cafe, which features Mr. Andrew, who sings and dances and tells stories for the children. But this cafe is sponsored by both the library and the Memorial Presbyterian Church, and it takes place over in the Presbyterian Church's community room from 9:30 to 12 p.m. And I think that would be on May 3rd, which is Tuesday, and then May 13th, another Tuesday. So I hope you'll come and either visit us at the library to take out some books or go to the cafe where there will be arts and crafts as well as snacks. So that's it for today. I hope to see you again next Monday for Storytime. Goodbye for now.